All right, what is going on, fishing fans? I hope you're having a wonderful day. Welcome back to the channel. Today's video, we're gonna be going over a couple different patterns that I like to find in the wintertime. We're gonna be talking about a bunch of different fish, the three main types of fish that I like to focus on as a whole. Got them kind of color-coded here. Blue is gonna be your most active fish. Pink is going to be your a little less active ones that are still roaming around. And then green are gonna be your fish that are very, very lethargic, don't wanna move a lot. And I have two drawings here. Hopefully you can see them pretty well. I know there's a little bit of a glare going on, so bear with me. I'll definitely try to highlight them as we go along here. So the first view that I have on this side of the whiteboard is going to be a more forward-facing sonar view. So if you're looking on this side going this way, I know traditionally it's supposed to look the other way just because that's how you look at the graph. But since I'm facing this way and I'm gonna pretend that I'm looking at this ledge or at this point, whatever this drop off is on your home body of water, and that's kind of how we're gonna be breaking it down. And then I've got another situation here. Before we hop into it, guys, though, make sure to check out all the online sales that we have going on, lakeprotackle.com. We've got a brand new podcast. It's gonna be a live podcast that will be on the Big Bass Blessings YouTube channel. It's gonna be December 5th at 4 p.m. Central Time, guys. It's called the Backlash Podcast. Myself, John Shin, in collaboration with Big Bass Dreams, on their channel, we're gonna be hosting a live podcast for y'all. It's gonna be a video podcast, not just a voice podcast, so make sure to tune in at 4 o'clock Central Time for that. So, you know, winter fishing is a very tough time of the year for a lot of people on the water. A lot of the times, the fish get in such a funk that it is very, very hard for some people to catch them, and it's very, very easy for some people to catch them. You know, if you're utilizing forward-facing sonar in the wintertime, most people are gonna have a lot more success, and that's not what I want to focus on in this, in this video here. You know, forward-facing will make it a lot easier because you can target specific fish. A lot of the times they get to where you can target them and they are very, very willing to eat the bait you put in their face or near their face. And a lot of the times, you know, they set up on just certain cover, and we're gonna talk about that here. So, like I said, guys, wintertime fishing, there's three main types of fish I focus on. The really, really active ones, the ones that are gonna be very easy to catch, the ones that suspend very high, the ones that are very opportunistic eaters, and then the green ones, which are gonna be your ones that are very, very lethargic, the ones that are, you're gonna have to work for them to get them to bite, or you're gonna have to be a little more finesse with them. So with this setup here on this ledge or point, whatever you wanna call it, basically any drop off, the main fish are going to be, the ones that I want to target first are generally going to be the bluefish, the ones that are very active, the ones that are actively pushing bait up. And a lot of the time in the wintertime, if you are on a ledge or a drop off or a hump or something like that, a lot of the times at the very top part or the top structure, a lot of the times these fish will be above that. So typically I like to focus anywhere from 12 to 15 or around 10 to 15 foot of water, just because that's about where the water, the sun penetration can get to, still stay warm, but not be super bright for those fish. So typically right here, if you see the top of this point, top of this ledge, I'm gonna draw like a little dotted line, hopefully you can see it. A lot of the time these bluefish, the more active ones, are gonna stay on top of this ledge, whether it's in a brush pile or whether it's going to be hanging off the ledge. A lot of the time, you know, they're gonna be chasing bait around, and let me actually get orange to simulate bait fish. There's gonna be, you know, schools of bait fish up on top of the ledge cruising around. There might be a few up at the top of the water column. There might be some cruising out way, way out in the main river channel sections out there. So typically these blue ones, they're gonna be sitting around brush piles, not in the brush piles, but around the brush piles, cruising around, eating crappie, eating big gizzard shad, and those are gonna be very fun to catch. Now, the ones that are sitting off the ledge, they're gonna be pushing the bait up that's suspended. They're gonna be pushing it against the ledge and being very active. A lot of these fish here are gonna be moving very, very fast. The ones that are a little bit slower are gonna be hanging on that cover, whether it's a brush pile, a tree, maybe grass if you have that still in your lake. And you know, a lot of the time in that 12 to 15 foot range, it's a very unique range for a lot of people. You know, one of my favorite baits in that 12 foot category is something like a 3XD from Strike King. I love the silent 3XDs in the wintertime. They don't have such a loud, obnoxious rattle, but they still get down to around 12 to 13 to 14 foot, depending on what size line you have on there. Another one of my favorites is going to be the Tactical DD crankbait from River to Sea. This guy here is really, really awesome. I love speed cranking this, and one of the biggest things I find with these active fish here is that they are definitely willing to chase down a meal that looks big enough to them and looks enticing enough. So the Tactical DD crankbait works in all different water depths, anywhere from effectively from around 6 foot all the way out to around 18 foot if you have the right line for it. The tactical bassin guys really love speed cranking it. It's not a very wide lip, so you can crank it really, really fast and pause it, and you can cause those fish to get a very easy reaction bite, Another one of my favorite baits is going to be a Rapala DT14. Now this bait here has a little bit wider bill, so you can fish this a lot slower if you have the more, not quite lethargic in the green category, but ones that are sitting off this ledge here that are gonna be your more traditional ledge fish. So if I do find fish that are not moving a lot off these ledges, but are still suspended high enough off the ledge, the DT is one of the biggest players I like to throw at them. Now, a lot of the time, if you do get the fish that are above the ledge here, that aren't moving a lot, you can always throw like a Texas rig worm or a Carolina rig, anything on the bottom, or like a Ned rig or a drop shot. Most of the time, these fish will still trigger on that. So all these baits I have here are a little more specific to, the fish that are suspended and not willing to chase a lot. But, obviously you can always throw a Texas rig and generally get a bite here and there. Now, another one of my favorite baits for specifically the bluefish, the more active ones, is going to be something like a jerkbait. Now, when it gets really cold, let's say sub 52 degrees, consistent, not rising, but consistent around that 52 degree mark, anywhere 52 down, a jerkbait, a finesse jerkbait, such as the Vision 110+1, 110+2, whether you weight it down to get down to around the 8 to 10 foot range, which is one of the most effective ranges to fish with a jerkbait. And you can weight down on +1 if you need it to raise up, and we'll talk about that specifically for more of the green fish here. We'll talk about that here in a second. But if you get this +1, whether it's suspending or slow sinking, it can be super, super deadly as you work it up the point and also dragging it off the point. So let's talk about the pink fish real quick. Now, the pink fish are one of my favorite ones to target with forward-facing sonar, generally a lot easier to see as you scan around left and right, and they show up very, very easily in the top of the water column. A lot of the times they are slowly moving around bait, and this is how a lot of the fish are being caught around your big bass lakes like O.H. Ivy and stuff like that, Possum Kingdom. A lot of these fish will suspend very high in the water column, generally within the top 1 to, let's say, 6 to 7 foot of water. A lot of them are very, very easy to catch. As you all know, I'm sure, the Josh Jones fishing style of fishing where you drop a swim jig on their head, maybe you sink down a glide bait like this, a big meal that's very easy to get in their face, will have a lot more drawing power, and a lot more opportunistic fish will go for these bigger baits here. If you get very lethargic big ones that are just cruising around here, might be chasing up on littler bait, obviously throwing a swim jig, you've got to get it really, really close to their face, but chances are if you do get it close to them, they're going to eat it. So those are just very simple fish to get to eat. A-rigs obviously work well. If you can get a jerkbait near them, a lot of the times they might spook off. So throwing like a big bait that, they see and they're like, oh, that's a big meal I should probably eat. They're gonna be a little more opportunistic towards it. The swim jig, same principle. It's not a very erratic bait. Now, obviously there's fish that will chase a jerkbait down that are up here in the water column. So, all fish are different. One of my favorite ways too is just to throw like an underspin. This can be very deadly. And let's talk about the last form of fish that I find. When you get a cold front coming in, so this weekend when I was out at Ray Roberts, the water temp started at 55 and just steadily warmed up, and we had a huge cold front hit about 1 or 2 days before. So a lot of the fish were still stuck down to the bottom, whether it's on like a brush pile, something like this, up on top of a ledge, or sitting way down under that top part where that ledge tops out at. They were sitting very, very close to the bottom. And I think a lot of that has to do with the core temperature of the earth. It's a lot warmer. Those fish want to stick down in it. Bellies in the mud. I'm sure you hear that a lot from the smallmouth guys. They're just sitting down there. they've probably fed up a bunch before the cold front, and now they're just kind of sitting, making sure they're not burning a lot of calories through chasing around bait and stuff like that. So one of the best ways that I find to get these fish to eat is with a rising bait. Not like the riser baits, you know, like the herring stuff, but something that can easily slow float or fast float, such as a 110. I had to take a lot of my weight off from my +1s, throw some +2s, and eventually get those fish to eat, because I would work this bait super, super far down, hit the ledge, and it would have to rise up for those fish to come up off the bottom and get them to eat. Another great way to do it is with the Rapala DT series. These things are very, very buoyant. You know, they're a balsa bait, so naturally they want to float. You know, working this bait down the ledge here, you know, throwing it up shallower, cranking it down to hit the ledge, and then slowly rising up, and then maybe just a small twitch here and there, maybe one solid full crank to get it to kick real hard. That would trigger a lot of those fish. Now, again, you can get them to eat Texas rigs, Carolina rigs when you're dragging on the bottom. It's just not quite as effective in my opinion, especially if you want to gauge how active those fish are. Now, you can always definitely throw something like an underspin for these winter fish, just sink it down real low here and get it right above that ledge. And that's a great way because they're still opportunistic. They just don't want to burn a lot of calories, move a lot to eat your bait. Swim jig is kind of the same principle that I like to do in the brush areas, not quite the ledges, but the brush areas. Sink it down in there, slowly work it through a brush pile. It is still a very great technique. You can leave your weed guard on and, you know, catch a ton of fish in the wintertime. Another great way that I like to catch a lot of the fish, especially if it's not quite this deep, you know, that 10 to 12 foot. But if we go over here to this graph, it's gonna show you a river channel in the middle here, and it's gonna slowly go up in contour. Let's just pretend this is like a 45-degree bank. If you get, you know, boulders or stumps or anything like that, a hybrid hunter is still a great way to catch a lot of those fish. It has a very chatterbait-esque presence to it, the way it moves through the water. So throwing this up shallow and paralleling down, let's say this, you know, 2 to 5 foot range where these boulders are, where these stumps are, depending on where you're fishing. Obviously, if you're fishing somewhere like Texoma, these are gonna be boulders. If you're fishing East Texas or something, these might be stumps like Fork, something like that. The hybrid hunter can be very, very deadly, especially in those situations. If you get something like a Rapala balsa bait that has a very subtle action, those can be super deadly as well. And we're gonna talk about each of the styles of fish that we talked about in this graph on the ledge in this one here. So like I said, this is gonna be kind of more like your 45-degree cut bank to a river channel out here in the middle. So this is, if you can imagine taking this forward-facing sonar view, you're basically looking at it from this way, right? If you're looking at this image, it will be like this right here, you know, assuming this is your cone length, whatever, blah, blah, blah. You're looking at just this little section at this image here from the river channel all the way up into a cut bank. So it's not quite exactly, because obviously at a 45-degree angle bank, this will be actually angled directly up. So just kind of imagine it that way, guys. But as you can see here, we still have the bluefish that are sitting on top of the brush and sitting off the ledge. You know, you've got the blue active fish generally in that little bit shallower range, anywhere from, you know, 6 to 12 to 15 foot out here. A lot of them are going to be sitting around the boulders. A lot of them are going to be sitting around stumps, chasing bait around, generally just being your little more active fish. And a lot of the times the bluefish are generally going to be your 2 to 4 pound fish, your schoolers, what I like to call schoolers, the ones that like to chase bait around, chase the bait in and around the rocks. You know, you got bait clouds up shallow here, got a couple in mid column, and you might have some bigger schools, bigger gizzards out in the channel. So the ones that are really shallow, guys, like I said, the hybrid hunter, the swim jig, your underspins, your shallower jerkbaits are gonna be very, very effective in these areas. Now the ones that are very hard to catch again are gonna be your greenfish, the ones that are stuck down to cover, the ones that are sitting directly on your stumps and your boulders that you really have to get to eat. You know, if we go back to reference this image over here, guys, on the forward-facing view, they're sitting so low, you gotta make them rise up or they're not gonna eat a lot of the times. So, you know, a jerkbait, throwing it up shallow, or even throwing it out deep and working it up is a very, very effective way, because your bait is generally always gonna be moving up in the water column as you bring it closer and closer to you, depending on, you know, the specific bait you have. You know, some of them defy that rule very well, especially the ones that have very fat bills on them, like a DT22 or something like that. But a DT14, guys, is an amazing bait, again, to fish either way, shallow to deep or deep to shallow. So these guys can be very effective. You know, this one here is just silver. This is a great bait fish color. It's got a black back, great for all types of water. You know, another great way, you know, you see Chris Zaldane do it all the time in his videos, not quite winter videos, but, you know, the swim bait guys out in like California, some here in Texas, throw the HUD 68s, those big boot tail swim baits. They're going to throw them out deeper, crawl them up the rocks, and get those reaction strikes, usually around this, let's call it like that mid-range, that 10 to 12 foot range. Those are a great area to get a lot of bites, because that's where a lot more of your bigger, more active fish are going to be sitting, not quite your big ones, the green ones that are just kind of sitting there. So, I mean, you'll have a big pink guy in here. You might have one really shallow, you know, like a 6-pounder, 7-pounder. But a lot of the times your biggest fish are going to be sitting in anywhere from 12 to 14 foot. That's where I find most of my big ones, whether they're suspended or not. A lot of the times I find a lot of my bigger fish in that 12 to 14 foot range. Usually just kind of cruising around looking for big bait. And that's kind of what I got, guys. These are just a few of the baits that I like to throw. Obviously, one of my favorites, again, the DT14 speed cranking with like a tactical DD crankbait. Guys, a blade bait can be very effective for every single fish in this category. It's just overall a great way to catch them. You know, working your blade bait shallow to deep is a great way to get those fish to eat. So, you know, throwing your blade bait super shallow, working it in and around that brush can be very difficult at times, but it is very effective. So the blade bait's a great one. A Demiki rig or like a hover strolling rig that you can work around the fish, you know, right on top of them. I mean, I call it kind of like crappie fishing, guys. You're basically working your bait right above the fish's face, whether they're going to be active around that brush pile, working it just off the bottom here. It is a great technique to get bit. So guys, I hope you enjoyed this little video here. Make sure to leave a comment down below on kind of what your favorite technique is in the winter time. Make sure to leave a like on the video and stay tuned for all the cool stuff we've got going on here. Make sure to tune into the Backlash podcast December 5th, 4 p.m. Central Time on the Big Bass Streams YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time, guys.